Ladies and gentlemen, and beauties and bimfluencers, welcome to episode 92 of Thompsin and Other Disappointments, a twice-weekly show in which I delve into the cruel and crushing worlds of politics, academia, tech, and, let's be honest, eye-soiling dystopia. I sometimes feel this show is like its USP is sort of, bringing you down. For the sake of familiarity, if that makes sense. Like, you know how some people are traumatized by shit men, but then they grow up and they're attracted to shit men because that's what they're familiar with, like I can handle this. This feels like home to me, like that sort of this podcast is like that. It's like we all know how fucked we are. We all sob at the news in despair. So then when you're looking for an uplifting bit of entertainment, then I swan in with this shit, like, look how fucked everything is. It's awful. And then you're like, yeah, okay, this is my jam. I like this. This feels like home. Like, normally you'd go to a comedy show to feel uplifted and improve your mood. I feel like my shows, you grab an episode and you enter it in a sort of crestfallen, downbeat mood, and then you emerge 40 minutes or an hour later like vaguely entertained, but with all of your fears and nightmares kind of backed up, realized like shit, the oil is gonna run out, oh fuck, there is no way that we could ever build enough nuclear power plants to replace fossil fuels. We really are fucked, come out of it, just crack open a bottle of gin. That's the sort of vibe that I'm going for. At least, that's my aim, is to spread my good news unto the world with this podcast. But seriously, if it's your first time listening to this podcast, it is run by a guy who spends his life on Twitter and TikTok, but miraculously does not fall into that faux positive, inspiring influencer bucket, but who instead forces you to look at the muck of the modern world. It's like the opposite of inspiring. It's, I hope to get some doom loaths out of it along the way, here and there. Hence the tag, rather than influencers, it's hashtag bimfluencers. And look, before we jump into it, special, cordial, sensual embraces to the Patreon backers, Kerry, Paul, and now Sarah. I set myself a first Patreon goal last week to get to 10 Patreons. And then when we reach that, when we've built out our little, I don't want to say commune. Commune's the wrong word. I'm going to go for cult still. When we've built out the first, the entry stages, the first tier of the cult, then we'll have a night out in London. And I guess what would be a meet and greet for actual influencers, that doesn't feel right for me. I don't want to do a fucking meet and greet. Nobody wants to meet and greet me and have me nodding at them or autographing fucking nonsense. That's just not me. So for me, I think a smarter thing, a more kind of on brand thing would just be to get the first 10 Patreons and give them an exclusive invite to a night out in London where we're just, it's not so much a meet up, it's like a piss up, and we'll just talk shit about the Tories. So if that's of interest to you, then jump on the Patreon. It's patreon.com/Aid Thompson. And if you're not familiar with Patreon, basically it's a way that independent artists or content generators or podcasts or singers, you can support people on Patreon. And because it's really fucking hard to make money doing creative stuff, you can support the people that you do appreciate. I guess that's the pitch, guys. And anyway, as I say, so the goal was 10, and the first 3 of those have gone now. So again, thank you to Kerry, Paul, and now Sarah, who jumped on it yesterday. I love and value your support more than that of some dead relatives. Relatives who were not supportive. But you're in the ground now, Grandma, so I win. Let me talk about this episode, right? So this episode I'm doing for you now is a weird one for me because I had a guest booked for tonight. I normally do a guest on a Friday night, 7:30, and then I do the solo shows on a Wednesday. And I booked a guest. His name's Dominic Mignola. And he's actually quite a sort of, I don't want to say famous because I don't know how many people would actually know his name or recognize him in the street. But he's a very well-known and highly respected television producer. And he's written for shows like Hamish Macbeth, had Robert Carlyle in it, and Robin Hood on BBC One. And his most famous show, though, is the ITV long-running comedy drama Doc Martin, starring Martin Clunes. And Dominic Mignola, the reason that he and I, our paths crossed and I was able to get him to agree to appear on the podcast is because he does a lot of political stuff as well. And so our paths crossed on Twitter, and then we're in this chat group, and I thought, do you know what? I could get him on and we could talk about politics and, some of the causes that he gets behind. And we could, just basically, do my thing, talk shit about Tories, right? So he graciously agreed to appear on the podcast, and we actually did it. We pre-recorded it yesterday because my girlfriend is away last night and tonight. So I thought I'll pre-record one. It works for me and Dominic in our diaries. This is smart. Dominic Mignola locked in. Boom. So we start the Skype call. That's how I start. That's how I do my recording stuff. It's through Skype and then through some podcast software. It's all sort of integrated. And sort of about 5 minutes into this, I'm noticing these little alerts going off in the bottom left of the software, saying something about a codec, something about encoding, or warning me. But I always get these fucking warnings, and it never, it always turns out okay. So I just assumed, it's just a fucking software. It's open source, it's free software, it's probably a bit buggy. When they tell you that there's errors or to look out for, do you really have to? Because it seems okay. So, so I just carried on. And then it was about sort of halfway in, I noticed that his microphone was dropping out loads. I couldn't see the level, the audio level coming in much. I was like, what the fuck? Because I could hear it fine. So I was like, well, it's probably all right. It's probably just my laptop, CPU. Just I'm still not sort of connecting it. I'm still, to me, it's there's these little warnings. It's probably nothing. And then, his microphone level's disappearing. And I'm like, it's probably fine. And anyway, long story short, I listened to it back. And my worst nightmare had come true. I've been saying to friends about this, I've just got this horrible feeling I'm going to book someone that's quite high profile, and then the tech will just give out, there'll be some sort of problem, and I will have wasted their time, and they could have been my in, to other guests, or to, God knows what. I sort of dread to think at this stage, who is Dominic Mignola connected to? Who might he have given me an introduction to, had this gone really well, and he was sat around a dinner table with producers, and oh yeah, I know this one guy who runs a podcast. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, you should check him out. Whereas now, how is that conversation going to go? It's going to be well, yeah, I did do his podcast one time, but yes, the tech didn't. He just sort of wasted an hour of my time, But he was totally understanding. I was really grovelly to him this morning. I was like, I'm so sorry I wasted your time. But it's just, hopefully with the amount of work you've done and the career that you've had, you must have had your fair share of tech problems, sort of really leaning on the possibility that somebody as professional and accomplished as Dominic Mignola must have had a couple of fuck ups along the way somewhere. You probably fucked up once or twice, haven't you? He's like, yeah, it happens all the time. Don't worry about it. He was so cool and nice. And I think I've said this before in other episodes, but it kind of comes back to this is an independent podcast, right? And the good thing about that, the pro to that, is you get to tell people, it's totally independent. It's not corporate. It's pretty punk rock. It's pretty cool, actually. It's quite edgy. Done it with no industry backing. All of these cliches that you could roll out sound quite cool, don't they? I've done it with no industry backing. It's 100% independent. Did I tell you that it's independent? Because it's actually really independent. These are nice things to be able to tell people when you're trying to grow something on your own. That's the pros. But then the cons to it is it's not corporate at all. So there's no fucking budget. It's Like, there's no budget. It's just like, I'm just a guy in a shed with some cheap tech, praying that it all just holds itself together for like an hour on a Friday night when I interview someone. And to be honest, like, for 99% of the time it's been fine, but just this one time, and I've been telling people, been saying to like friends and stuff, like, I just got this feeling like that it's at some point I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm going to book someone and it's not going to pan out, and they're going to think I'm a twat, and I can't really rule out that I wasn't, hacked. I wasn't hacked by like the Russian internet research agency. Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe I'll start that rumor. They always get good press. It wasn't that I'm a tin pot independent podcast guy in a rickety shed with the unreliable cheap tech that can't afford a producer. It's definitely that Russians hacked Aid Thompson's podcast. Scandal, fear, terror, Putin, more fear, more publicity. Like, it could be funny. Like, if that shit gets picked up by enough clueless boomer hacks, I'll fuck around and end up verified, Kremlin hacked Aid's show and rendered it useless. And then their comment section will be like, why did they bother? Why bother hacking his show, rendering it shit? Like, why bother with all the computer science degrees and government funding to achieve that which was already so? Like, we're going to hack his podcast and make it shit. Oh, really? I wonder what that'll be like. I'm all for setting yourself achievable goals, but honestly, making my podcast shit feels a bit like, phoning it in. I don't know. In terms of getting verified, though, like, there's something so fucked about how you need to be referenced in prominent publications, prominent news outlets, tabloids, right? You get a blue tick if Twitter can see that you've been referenced in, say, the Mail Online or the Sun. And yet, how reliable or verified are those publications or their stories? They're about as reliable as a fucking Tory party Facebook election ad. Infamously unreliable, constantly hung out to dry for lying and corrections and sued for misrepresentation, and yet they're the guys that Twitter are like, oh, you've been mentioned in the Mail. Oh, yeah, you're legit. It reminds me actually of I was trying to dob myself in with the Express and the Mail. It's sort of quite a funny campaign. I kind of half-assed, didn't even really start. It was about, 8 weeks ago, 12 weeks ago. Like, the idea was to sort of snitch on myself, tagging them in my tweets, like at Express, at Mail Online. And I would say shit like, Twitter say I need to be referenced in 3 prominent publications to get verified. So, hey, like, at Daily Mail, hey, like, Express. My dad worked at the BBC. I voted Remain, and I think Brexiters fuck livestock. So fucking do your worst, Like, take the hit piece just to be referenced one step closer to that blue tick. Maybe I should pick that up again. Or maybe not. I don't know, I'll fuck around and get like a 5-page expose in the Express. Their political editor, Mesa Hall, dragging my name through the mud. Have my employer, my friends, my family know my drug history, and they'll have like anonymous sources talking about how I was gacked out of my face on coke, talking nonsense at 4 a.m, like rapping freestyles about God knows what in who knows whose kitchen, like trash my reputation, end up jobless and homeless, and my girlfriend would be like where the fuck are we gonna live? Like, how are we gonna eat? And I'll be like, no, it's cool, look, just one more cunty article and I'll have a blue tick. I'm almost there, stick with me. She'll be like, yeah, you chase your blue tick, I'm gonna chase some new dick. How about that? You know, the fuck out of it. Anyway, in other news, I'm not even sure, like, how did I even get onto all of that? Let's talk about the weather. That feels like a very British thing to do. It's been so hot today, like uncomfortably hot. And I say that as a guy who, you know, I love hot weather. I'm definitely not one of these people that's like, no, you know, I like winter. I just like winter, you know. I just like, or like one of these people who's like, no, it's too hot now, isn't it? Oh, this is just too hot. Like, fuck that. I like hot weather. I never understand people who are like, well, I just like winter. You know, I like the snow and the winter and the cold. When it's cold outside and you're in the pub and you're cozy with your mates around you with a glass of wine and a Guinness. And it's like, I always feel like, no. Oh, so you like the pub. That's what you like. That's what you're describing to me. Who doesn't like the pub? Like, for me, my natural habitat, I think, is, you know, comfortably 30 degrees. I think that's fine. Wait, I'm going to stop. I'm going to grab a beer, guys. The sound that you can hear is the real, authentic sound of an exhausted father of two grabbing a fucking beer. Don't judge me. Where were we? We were talking about the weather, right? So it's been 30 degrees. This is the sound that you're waiting for. Here we go. There we go. This is such a nutty country when the temperature goes over 20, which if you're listening in the US or there, you know, if you work from Fahrenheit, what is 20 in Fahrenheit? It's about 68, 70, somewhere around that. When it goes above 20 in the UK, people go fucking nuts. Like, because we spend like 10 months of the year at like 9 degrees, rainy and overcast. It's just shit weather like all the time, or the majority of the time, right? I think that's why we're so self-deprecating and miserable and cynical. You know, it's like, what's it called? Fucking seasonal affective disorder, isn't it? SAD. Seasonal affective disorder. Like, it's sunny, so you're happy, and then if it's cold and rainy, then you get down. But it could also be like here's a theory. Do you think Brits are kind of miserable because the weather pushes us into shit relationships? Do you think that's what it is? Like, I'll explain. Like, the weather pushes us into shit relationships with people that we actually wouldn't really normally have any interest in. Like it's so cold and shit for most of the time. I reckon most Brits could go out on 3 or 4 dates. Pretty normal, right? And they socially like each other. And maybe the woman is like, well, he's got a handsome face. He looks quite cute. He's quite handsome. He's quite good looking. But then date 4, you go back to his place. You take off your clothes and you're in good shape. But then you look at your date, who you've only really seen his face because he's, you know, wrapped up warm, like it's fucking cold and miserable and rainy the whole time. But like date 4, sorry. By the time you get back to his place and you take off your clothes, you're all right, and you look at him, you're like, oh no. But now you're in too deep. Now you're locked into fucking seeing each other. You can't like be that heartless and uncaring where you're like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought that you were not this that I'm seeing in front of me. So you end up in a shit relationship with somebody that maybe I'll grow to love him. You know, and it just makes you a bit down. I don't know. Maybe there's something in that. Does anyone else think it's nuts how nuts we go, though? Like in hot weather. 20 degrees, lunacy, no control. People get fucking shit hammered in public parks and fight each other. People shove fireworks up their arse and end up in the tabloids. And then we get like today, I walked past the newsstand at the 24-hour garage. I was doing like my usual morning walk around, get a coffee, that sort of vibe. And there's like a front page of the Star was like a warning about the hot weather. Like, make sure you drink lots of water today. It's a really hot day. So the news headline, the front page, the most important news that we can give you right now is that you gotta drink some water. Like, I'm 41 years old. Like, what is this? This is the news, is it really? You gotta drink water on a hot day, guys. Really, buckle in. This is I've seen a hot day before. I know it's England, but Christ. We're pretty much like, we're the only country in the world who would vote for global warming. If somebody like Nigel Farage came out with like the pro global warming party or something, like, I dread to think, it is terrifying to me to think how successful that would be. You'd get floating voters who are just sick of shit weather, who'd be like, well, let's hear him out, The whole campaign would just be like a guy spraying aerosols up at the sky. Do you remember the whole, like, what were they called? Was it CS gas? I'm showing my age here, but like back in the day, in the 90s, there was a big thing about the ozone layer, right? And that these aerosol cans had chemicals in them that when you spray them, it ends up in the ozone layer and creates a hole or burns it. There was something about, I'm not a scientist. Go fuck yourselves. I don't know the intricacies of the science of it, but it was something to do with like a specific thing in aerosol cans. And if Farage created a party like that, where the whole campaign was just a guy spraying aerosol cans into the ozone layer to burn it away, to make this country hotter, I think it would be ferociously successful. People would be like, yes, this guy gets it. He represents my interests. I'm fed up of rainy August holidays in Bognor. Give me 6 weeks of 30-degree heat, please. Like, they would vote for that. You get like Tory coalition talk, like, we're gonna have to make a fucking pact with the global warming party, and like, I don't like it either. But they've chunked off like 15% of our vote. What are we supposed to do? Yeah, okay, look, we're willing to entertain actually sending rockets up and deliberately burning through ozone. Like, that's, yeah. There's an electoral market for it. We're going to have to address it. What else has been in the news this week? Lots more flights at Gatwick, loads of cancellations. Everyone feels like they're owed a holiday at the moment. We're booked up, full disclosure. We're going to Thailand for our first holiday in fucking years. Although, I don't know if there's any dads listening, but I think my brother put it best when he said, like, a father on holiday is really no holiday at all. So, kind of brutal. A father on holiday is really no holiday at all. Like, it's, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the sun and the beach and the cocktails and, spending time with the family and actually being away from where we live. But it's, I've got a horrible feeling I'm going to end up shouting at my kids and telling them to stay away from the pool. And, it's 18-month-old. I don't want to be that guy that ends up in a really dark news story. Like toddlers drowning in foreign pool and like all that stuff. I've just got this horrible feeling that I'm going to be so stressed chasing after my kids. And then you really are in the realm of like, is this even a holiday? Am I having fun? But yeah, so flights gone at Gatwick. And I saw an interview today, or a thing on Sky News, where they were saying 18 months, they reckon. 18 months, a year and a half, they think, to fill the staffing gap that they have at Gatwick. Like, how fucking crazy is that? How many people are they short? 18 months to fill the backfill of staff that they need, or that they like, who's even advising that number? Like, can't they get the guys from the analysis and media teams to load some fucking bags on? Like, I don't want to belittle the work that baggage handlers do here, but come on. I mean, like, people are desperate to earn money at the moment. Cost of living crisis. You're telling me you couldn't find 500 new staff and teach them how to properly leave a dent in my case? Because it doesn't seem that hard to me. It seems like they've fucking smashed that target several times in my life before. Seems like something that could actually be solved. You could backfill all of these jobs, I reckon, in my hugely unqualified opinion, by raising the rate, like £2 an hour. Like, increase the rate that you're paying the baggage handlers, the vacancies, £2 an hour, and just see then if there's, if there's still the same problems recruiting. Because I swear that's half the problem with challenges like this one. Like, you get heads of industries and CEOs and CFOs doing everything they can to avoid saying the obvious. Whether that's like, Brexit, the initial staff shortage, like to avoid saying shit like, well, all of our staff were from Europe, and then when the pandemic hit, they went home, and now they don't have freedom of movement, So they're kind of fucked. They can't come back. But they can't say that because, I don't know, either they're a donor or they're affiliated with the Conservative Party or they don't want to be mauled by the press. So instead of accepting and communicating the truth, they just have to shrug and say shit like, well, there's a weird labour shortage. It's just come out of nowhere. You know, like, is there? Really? I'm pretty sure there's 1 million people unemployed in this country. I'm pretty sure people are still working the gig economy, driving Ubers and Deliveroo and Amazon deliveries. And, you know, they'd probably jump at the chance at some steady airport work, 5 shifts a week guaranteed, sick pay, discount meals, access to duty free, maybe some cheap flights, a grace and favour flat. No, wait, hang on. No, maybe not that last one. That is exclusively a Tory government fringe benefit. But if you listed all the other stuff, you know, the duty free, the 5 shifts a week, guaranteed, the sick pay, the holiday pay, like, you know, people in the gig economy might say, like, oh, you know, that sounds pretty good. And then you have to say, yeah, but the wage is £10 an hour. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? It's what? Yeah, it's £10 an hour. Oh, and then you get taxed, which has just been raised as well. And then you got to drive in and out, and that's, you know, cost of petrol soaring too. Oh, well, fuck that. I'm sorry, it's a steady job. I thought you'd be interested. Yeah, but, you know, I could take McDonald's breakfast to people and work when I like, and it'll come out the fucking same, like £10 an hour. The fuck is this nonsense? You know, like, I really feel like they try everything except paying enough to attract people. Like, it's so innate. They just can't quite bring myself to pay people what the market is telling me I definitely need to pay people. Like, just don't feel quite that desperate yet. So I will cancel these flights and ruin these thousands of people's holidays. Yeah, I will drag the name of this airline through the mud. You know, it's not quite bad enough yet for me to be forced to pay these people what the market is telling me I definitely should be paying them. It's like how many times have you seen like CEOs and CFOs say shit like, oh, there's a labour shortage? Like, how much are you paying? Well, it's £3.59 for a whole day's work. £3.59, is that it? No, and then they get physically beaten as well. You know, we physically beat all of our staff and pay them one shiny penny a day, but honestly, it's been really hard to recruit. It's like nobody wants to work anymore. I bet they're all at home in their pajamas, I reckon. Bloody work from home, Romaniac, lefty tossers, all of them, you know? Like, does anyone seriously think there'd be a shortage of baggage handlers if they started paying £20 an hour? Like, maybe that's just how much that job costs now. To drive in and out of the airport, to, you know, do whatever it is that they do all day. Drive back home out to the home counties wherever they live. You know, maybe that job just has to pay £20 an hour. And if they paid that, no, of course there wouldn't be a labour shortage. You'd have a fully staffed airport, smiling men and women at the check-in. For £25 an hour, the best airport staff money can buy. The best customer service you can possibly imagine. You get people going like, good morning, Mr. Thompson. How may I help you this morning? Are you all set for your flight? Can I get you anything? Tea, coffee, blowjob? I could dance for you. I'll dance for you. Here we go. You know, like if they paid enough. But it's so weird, isn't it? Because it's like, yeah, we just can't find the staff. There's a huge labour shortage. You know, like, well, if you paid enough, that would help your business. That would help it run. More people would use it, you would make more money, and you personally would be more successful. You may even get a fatter bonus at the end of it, and still they're like, nah. Like, that's how deep the classist hate runs. You know, like even when it's in their own psychopathic interest, it's like, oh, you know, I like money. I like getting a big bonus. I like status and being a success. I like all that, but I really like seeing poor people struggle. It's so sort of innate. Bizarre. What else is happening this week? In the United States, guys, it is all eyes on this fucking January the 6th House investigation. I don't know how many of you have been following this or what, but wait, quick sip of beer. If you're unaware of this, cast your mind back to January the 6th, 2020, and recall that weird day when Dixie flag waving Yanks stormed the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And there was that whole Stop the Steal movement, which was hilarious in itself because, from memory now, I remember as they were counting the results, counting them in. Like, which state was it now? It was, God, I can't fucking remember. It was somewhere that the Republicans and Trump specifically had tried to fuck over. And I remember reading about groups hanging around outside polling stations and sort of, voter intimidation. And then there was a demonization of like mail-in ballots, posted ballots. But that voter intimidation and the mail-in ballots thing, that they caused two things to happen, respectively. I'm losing my words now. It's been a long week. But the first thing that happened was people stayed home because they didn't want to be intimidated. They didn't want to go to a polling station and have a load of fucking cowboy hat wearing Dixieland cross gun toting cunts go like, who you're voting for? I hope you're going to make the right decision in there. So, they didn't want that shit. And the second thing that happened was that, because Trump and his lot had demonized the postal ballot thing, then Republicans kind of didn't want to vote by postal ballot, that's not their thing. They're all about queuing in line and, doing it, quote unquote, the proper way. And so then as the results came in, it was kind of neck and neck, I think, from memory, when they were counting the queued up, polling station votes. That was kind of neck and neck, I think, from memory. And then what happened was then they started counting the postal ballots. And because the postal ballots were so weighted in favor of the Democrats for the reasons that I've outlined, then Trump was like, whoa, hang on, what, how, and I guess people at CNN and NBC and Washington Post and so on had all been born with eyeballs because they were able to see what a total fucking joke this was. You fucking idiot. You demonized the mail ballots, so of course they're going to swing left. Democrats are going to use the postal ballots, and your guys were going to use the how do you not understand? What did you expect? And as ever, it became an exercise in, is he really this stupid? Or is he hoping his followers are? And I'd hedge it's the latter. He's hoping his followers are that stupid. Trump doesn't really strike me as a sort of Machiavellian genius. He strikes me more as a moody crimson baby that blames everyone else for his failures, of which this was one, and arguably his biggest and most humiliating. And so the January the 6th investigation has heard from a bunch of people, loads of testimony, talking about what happened and to what extent Donald Trump himself was involved, and to what extent you could categorize this as, not just as we see it, but because we sort of see it as a sort of dumb Yankee parade that got a bit deathy, right? But more to what extent could you categorize this as an attempted coup? That's what this House investigation is looking at. And last week we had Trump's own daughter, Ivanka Trump. Am I saying that right? Ivanka? And she's up there stating that she doesn't believe that the election was stolen. Wow. Trump's own daughter saying, no, this wasn't stolen. Biden won it. Basically talking shit about her own dad. And then there's plenty of others giving quite damning testimony also. Sky are reporting that some of Trump's closest advisors thought the attempt to overturn the election was crazy. That's the quote. His closest advisors were like, "Oh, this is kind of batshit." I like the idea that they were still his advisors on January the 6th, but that's after all the other batshit stuff that he'd done. They should have built up some sort of understanding of who they would do. On January the 6th, after trying to hoard the world's supply of vaccines. Do you remember that when he phoned up the guy in Germany and he was like, yeah, America first. Like, I want to buy up all of your stock for America only and the intellectual property. Do you remember that was fucking crazy? And then committing to the gigantic wall and making Mexico pay for it and busting geopolitical alliances with people like Theresa May and Angela Merkel and calling African countries shitholes and stoking nuclear war with North Korea. Like, I like the idea that on January the 6th, after all of that, like, his advisors are like, Donald's acting a bit funny, like bit out of character, Yeah, we should keep an eye on him in case he carries on being crazy. It's just. So Sky is saying that there was, some lady called Sarah Matthews, who's a Trump or who was a Trump White House staffer, and she's described one of Trump's tweets around that time as like pouring gasoline on the fire of these ongoing riots outside. And there's some other crazy shit that's coming out. Mike Pence, who you'll recall was Trump's vice president, he apparently went tit for tat with Donald Trump. And we have this idea, don't we, through news and through inaction and people not taking a stand publicly, that everyone's just a patsy for Trump. Everyone's just a lapdog. Nobody will actually speak up against him. And the ones that do are then sort of reprimanded and ostracized by the rest of the Republican Party. And so we get this idea that nobody actually ever stands up to him. But this story about Mike Pence, lambasting him, he's like, you don't have the authority to stop the vote being certified in Congress. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, apparently this exchange happened. So, I never thought I'd say this sentence, but fair play to Mike Pence. And there's also some other weird stuff that's come out, or rather been mentioned or acknowledged in the official setting that we kind of knew already. We knew about like the Hang Mike Pence protests with the effigy of Mike Pence being strung up and the gallows. Like, it's so crazy. Just utterly wild behavior. Just like flag-waving lunatics, radicalized lunatics, who, if you spoke to them 10 years ago, 15 years ago, do you think you'll ever storm the Capitol and wave a Dixieland cross and talk about hanging a vice president? Like, what? No. Why would I do that? Like, well, let me fast forward you 15 years. Take a look at this guy. This is you, bro. Like, they'd be so weirded out. Like, oh my God, what happened to me? I think I talked about that on the Wednesday show. Sorry for the repetition. You deserve more, listeners. But these guys who were talking about like hanging Mike Pence, I guess we need to take it with a pinch of salt. They might not have been serious, but in the setting where 6 people died and the legacy president, Donald Trump, was talking about, stop the steal and we don't quit, we won't concede and all that. Like, it's kind of terrifying. And they got up to apparently within 50 feet of where Pence was sheltering with his staff, scared. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they could have found him and done like, God knows what to him. And it's a bit like, for what? Like, for standing up to Trump and refusing to violate an election result. Like, it's so strange, isn't it, when you think of half of these people waving the flags and, gun toting and talking about America and it's the greatest country and freedom. And like, America likes to pride itself as like the greatest democracy in the world. And yet these are people who are willing to trash democracy and shit all over the Constitution because they just want their guy to hold on a little bit longer. And so they're willing to shout stuff like, hang Mike Pence, hang Mike. Like, it's so strange. And besides that, there's a lot of stuff you could hang Mike Pence for. I can't believe I'm saying this, but like why hang Mike Pence for standing up to Trump? Like, there's a zillion things. Like if you're going to string Mike Pence up, you've got to pick and mix of reasons out there. Like, pick a good one. Like, don't make it some fantasy cosplay freedom nonsense. Like, isn't he hugely homophobic and kind of against gay marriage? Like, long history of being against LGBTQ and GLAAD and so on. Like, I remember hearing a stand-up comedian on a podcast once talking about how Pence is actually a closet homosexual. Like, he was sort of joking about it. He was like, what if Mike Pence is actually a closet homosexual? And that's why he's so vehemently opposed to people from those walks of life. And anyway, the joke was that the comedian was saying, like, nobody chooses whether they're gay or not, right? Nobody chooses. Except for Mike Pence, who wakes up every morning and chooses to be straight instead. Or something like he's pretending to be straight this whole time. He's the only guy that chooses whether or not he's gay or straight or something. I don't know. It's not my joke. I've butchered it clearly. I'm sorry. There's a reason I never made it with stand-up. Clearly, guys. That is it. Sorry to end so abruptly. I'm back next Wednesday for the solo show. Next Friday, I will hopefully have a guest on once I've sorted out the technology side of things. Don't forget, you can always grab the episodes first. They're always posted first on patreon.com/AidThompson. And then they go on Spotify and Apple Podcasts 3 days later. So if you're not in a position to contribute via Patreon and join my cult, then don't worry, the podcast will always be free. You just might have to wait a couple of days later, because it's only fair to give to the people who are contributing towards it the first look. There's also a political blog that comes out on Sunday morning, sort of satirical, self-satisfied reflection on the week that's just happened or whatever that takes my fancy. But all of those blogs and all the historic episodes of the podcast are always up on the Funk-27 website. Thanks again to my guest this time, myself. Give me a follow on Twitter. This is the stuff that I normally say about the guest. So, yeah. Give me a follow on Twitter if you're not following me already. Say hey. It's at AidThompson. And, if you wouldn't mind leaving me a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from, that would be just peachy. Thanks once again. I'll catch up with you all soon. #Bimfluencers. #BorisFucksLivestock. We outie.